At class participation today will be 10% of your grades, and I will call on you. How's that? And there may even be a quiz for all of you in the cheap seats up there as well. So for anyone who's really interested in what I have to say, please follow me on LinkedIn at Dr. Joe Coughlin. That's where I put a lot of crazy stuff. So let's get into this. Let's do this. So I had the pleasure of meeting with Swan and Alicia earlier this year with my good friend Brian Forms of Transamerica to talk about all of you, how you do what you do, how you do it so well, and how you can be an agent for change, not just in your own lives, but in the lives of others. How can you help people prepare not just for financial security, not just for financial education, but what I want to introduce to you today is the notion of longevity planning, longevity preparedness, and in fact, expand on the body of work, the amazing work all of you are doing in financial education to start speaking about longevity literacy. You see, finance is absolutely critical to anything we do, but like electricity, it's all about what you want to do. How are we prepared for that overall? So again, remember class participation, 10% of your grades today. How many of you have gone shopping for birthday cards lately? I want you to imagine the following. So this may be a little bit of a test here in terms of age range. Does anyone here remember Willard Scott on the Today Show? Remember that? Oh, you are old, aren't you? No, remember? He was this guy on the weather report that would say happy birthday to people. Families, God knows what kind of families these were, would send in photos of their mother, of their father, of their grandparents turning 100, and they'd send in pictures that kind of look like this. It's like, how nice is that? And he would do a happy birthday. In fact, the Queen of England used to write a handwritten note to every person in the UK that turned 100. She didn't do that anymore. No, not because she's dead. Who said that? No, not because she's dead. There's something going on that side of the room. No, not because she's dead, but because frankly, believe it or not, turning 100 is not that big a deal anymore. So these are images I took of birthday cards at a local drugstore. Imagine this, it used to be if you were 50, you were over the hill, 60, now you're talking about retirement. All of a sudden now, 90, 95, 100, where you get not just 1, 2, or 3, or 4 selections, but 100 has become increasingly the new normal. So let me show you something. You can start getting you to think about all the people that you serve and about your own lives overall. I want you to look at these kids. Aren't they cute? Okay, come on, are they cute? Yes, they're cute. Do you want to know why they're cute? They're not teenagers yet. That is why they're cute. But I want you to imagine this. Research indicates that in the so-called industrialized world, 1/2 of these children, imagine, 1/2 of them will live over 100 years. These are people that are already among us born in the 1990s and 2000s. They are our friends, our siblings, our sons, daughters, grandchildren alike. And once you start thinking about life expectancy of 100 years. Now, many of you may be going immediately to that space and going, wow, that is a new financial challenge ahead. It is a longevity opportunity. We have always defined old age as something we want, but sadly so many people talk about how older age or longevity is a risk. It's not a risk, it is a dividend to cash in. It is a new benefit of longer life. But now start thinking about what kind of advice people are going to be needing for that longer life. 100 years of living. Start thinking about the following. How many of us ask our children or tell our children, what are you going to be when you grow up? Not an incorrect question, but woefully incomplete. If you're going to be having 40, 50, 60, 70 years of a work life or more, the new question is going to be, how many things will you be when you grow up? Think about the career transitions. All of you, many of you, when we're interviewing many of your colleagues, the number of careers, the education. And by the way, speaking of education, do you genuinely believe that getting an education from a geek that looks like me is going to last you for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of work? By the way, just between us, don't tell anybody else, just secret. Will my wife of 38 years want to hear me tell the same jokes for the next 38 years? We don't know. So what I'm telling you is that 100 years of life changes the equation. And what I want you to think about is that today finance is built on a beautiful linear model. You see, you're born, your parents raise you, you get an education, you get a job, you find a significant other, you have 2.1 children, you buy a dog, you buy a property, and then you retire. Well, guess what? That's happening out there, but it's actually changing dramatically. And time, in many ways, is making that change. We're finding new life stages. In fact, we're taking longer time to do things we used to do in short order, where we're finding that retirement is not that short period of life, but much longer. So, by the way, if you like what I have to say this morning, please give my team credit. If you don't like what I have to say, keep it to yourself. But this is 1/3 every flavor of psychology, 1/3 of data science and engineering, and another third social work, anthropology, political science. By the way, are there any economists in the room? Good, we can talk about them. No one likes them, they're too depressing. We try to keep them out. So let me begin with a story to give you an idea of what I'm talking about when I talk about longevity planning per se. Let me introduce you to a woman who I never met, I wish I had, but she inspired me to start the Age Lab 25 years ago. This is Sarah Noss. Sarah Noss lived outside of Philadelphia, and this is Sarah Noss on her 119th birthday. And so she was asked, by the way, can you imagine the profound gumption, chutzpah, whatever word you want to use? A journalist actually asked her, Ms. Noss, why do you enjoy living so long? Can you imagine asking this woman that question? But you know something? Sarah Noss came back with an answer far better, far greater than any professor, policymaker, pundit, whatever it might be. She said, I enjoy my life because I have my health and I can do things. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe you are on a new frontier of longevity planning, longevity literacy, to help all of us anticipate and navigate and meet the challenges, but also to seize the opportunities of what a longer life filled with the ability to do things will be. Remember, we don't want just time, we want quality of time. And while we all like to talk about planning for retirement or planning for financial security, I'm going to play a little word game with you. And it sounds like a word game, but I think it has a profound difference in how we think about things. Are you planning or are you preparing? See, planning in my mind is much like a shopping list. So if I go to the store and I have this list, frankly, even a well-planned document that says, hey, you're ready to eat or you're ready to retire. Guess what? Until that food's in my cart or in my cabinet at home or frankly on the stove, I'm not eating. What I want to have you think about is now that we think about financial security, start thinking not just about products and people. I want you to start thinking about solutions. How do you connect conversations and content and ways of engaging your clients and your colleagues and life to start thinking about it's not just about the finances, it's about what are you going to do? Who are you going to do it with? What are the services you're going to need? Because here's something I want you to think about. Very few people buy a product or service or a piece of advice because that's what they want. When you go to buy something, you're actually trying to achieve a job. I'll give you a quick example. When you go to buy a drill, do you want to buy the drill? Do you want the brand, the color? Do you look at the price? Is that what you're buying? What are you buying? You're buying a whole. In fact, you're buying the picture on the wall. I want you to start thinking about in your dialogues and conversations with clients and everyone you speak to about the solution to what they're trying to get done, the jobs that they are trying to get done. And the jobs of longevity have profoundly changed. And it's not just about us living longer. All the little things that we used to depend upon that made it possible for us to live longer and better are in flux. So let's get to one of them that many of us don't even think about, but it's happening out there. How about kids? You know, the original Social Security, the way any of us lived well was not necessarily, following doctor's orders, exercising, eating, choosing our parents well. It was actually having enough kids to be caregivers later on in life. Well, guess what? Apparently we don't want kids. We don't like kids anymore, apparently. In fact, I just wrote this in Forbes. We are seeing such a downturn in the number of children. Just to get geeky with you for a moment, you need 2.1 children per female just to keep a population even. And guess what? In the United States, we're down to 1.6, Europe 1.4, and imagine this, in Seoul, South Korea, anybody want to guess how many children per female? 0.08. So the answer is no, just no. In fact, this is not a COVID thing, this is not a pandemic issue. For the last 70 years, we've watched birth rates just plummet all the way down. In fact, for decades, we had to hear about how the world was going to be overpopulated. More people, more people. Well, the answer is, yes, there will be more people, but we're coming up to about 2050, 2060, and we're starting to come down the other side. The only thing I can imagine is that we basically remember ourselves as teenagers, and we just don't want that over again. In fact, to make this, shall we say, something that you can imagine and envision, look at this. There is now selling more baby carriages for pets than they are for children. My own daughter came home with a dog with her husband and said, "You are now a dog grandparent." I said, "No, I'm not." By 2047, there will be more people on the planet over the age of retirement than there will be people under the age of 18. Ladies and gentlemen, this has never happened before. This is unprecedented. War, pandemic, and like always had a depression in birth rates and then came right back up, hence the name baby boom, or in Japan, dankai, whatever verbiage you want to use. This time, it's not happening. In fact, I know 2047 for most of us is kind of like, well, Joe, that's kind of further out there. It's beyond my planning horizon. Well, I'll tell you what, how many of my friends out here are from Canada? Anybody? I got a good chunk of family in Ontario and Quebec, and guess what? They're really old. 2016 in Canada, already there are more Canadians over retirement than there are under the age of 18. And here in the United States, we had to adjust the numbers. 2034. You see, this is in economics, I like to say, is 2 parts math, 1 part's witchcraft. Technology, 1 part hope, 2 parts engineering. But demography is destiny. Your customers, your clients, your life is being reshaped in real time by the new value of longevity. By the way, the older people that we're thinking about and serving, first off, they're all of us at some point, but this is not your grandmother, grandfather's, great-grandparents' old age. I want you to imagine this. Technology is no longer just for the kids. In fact, do you know the fastest growing group of people on Facebook are women over the age of 47? This is why every undergraduate I speak to, if I want to freak them out, I say, "Do you have a Facebook page?" And they go, "No!" Do you want to know why? Well, the younger people go, "What's Facebook?" But the older people go, "I don't want to post what I did Friday night to have my mother see it on Saturday morning and my grandmother to see it on Saturday night." In fact, technology and reaching to older customers has gotten to the point where, believe it or not, the fastest growing group of people playing video games are older adults. They actually now have a whole new medical issue called Wii wrist and Wii elbow, where they're playing with such verve that they're actually hurting ligaments and the like. You see, this is a new population of older age. Now look, there's something else going on. The number of people with an education, whether it's high school, college, or graduate school, is the highest it's ever been. We now have clients and customers and colleagues that have more formal education than any time in history. Now I have to confess to you, my day job is education. My day job is in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I don't know if you ever heard there's a school up the river from us. It's an art school. What is it? Oh, Harvard, that's it, yeah. So we have a lot of education around us. Education does not necessarily make you smart. It does give you chronic attitude, however. I want you to imagine the following. 70% of the 50 plus believe they have an above average IQ. Put your mathematical hat on. 70% above the average. Really? We could also go down the street and do kind of a field study. Yes, no, definitely not. Yes, no, whatever it might be. But this is translating on how you have to deliver advice, how you have to think about products and policies and the like. Because guess what? Some work we did with Transamerica, my good friend Brian Forbes, who's here in the back, we did a survey nationwide. Believe it or not, 75% of us out there, at least in the United States, said that we think we're more confident in our abilities. If that's true, then why are so few people prepared for retirement? And one of the things I think we're looking at is that education is giving us the sense that, well, you know, I need brain surgery. I saw it on YouTube. I could probably do it myself, but maybe I'll delegate it out. So expertise alone is no longer the way to engage a client or a prospect. It is a way of saying, I am going to, frankly, I think this is the secret sauce to Salon's magic, educate you to make you better going forward. So we have to appeal on that level. And by the way, it's not just that we have more education and more technology and more numbers, if you will. Gentlemen, if you want to hit the happy hour now, now's the time. As I write my book, The Longevity Economy, the future is female. And by the way, it always has been. 70 to 80 cents on the dollar of everything purchased. Not just the United States, not just Europe, much of Asia is purchased by a woman, directly influenced by a woman. You want to talk to somebody about healthcare? Sure, talk to the couple. But 90 cents on the dollar of every healthcare decision, from the doctor to the toothpaste to the health insurance and the like, is made by a woman. And when it comes to the car issue, if you want to buy a car, 67% of car purchases are made by women. Now, I sat on Daimler's advisory board for a number of years. We weren't just interested in any car, we were only interested in luxury cars. And guess what? 87% of purchases were directly influenced or purchased by women. So if you want to know who the chief consumer officer is, the chief purchasing officer in a home, more likely than not, it is she. And by the way, she is also the #1 trusted source of information. Do you know that women are 3 times more likely not just to do research online to find you, to validate you, or to find out how to solve her issues? She is also 3 times more likely to do research online to advise a friend, a family member, and the like. If you can understand her, you can understand many different groups in her family and beyond. So now look, we have a rather intimate group here today. I'm going to keep this between us, so please keep it to yourself. My wife always rolls her eyes when I say this. I have a lot of interest in middle-aged women. Just saying. You should too. Why is that? Do you know that survey after survey has indicated that so-called millennials, those in their 30s and 40s, that their best friend, their most trusted advisor, is not their father. But sadly, for me, it's mom. And guess what? I already demonstrated to you that she's the chief consumer officer of her home, and she probably has a significant other who can't make a tuna fish sandwich. And by the way, if she's the oldest adult daughter, guess what? The oldest adult daughter, after a spouse, is the one that is most likely to be a caregiver, not just for 1 parent, 2 parents, but she may have as many as 4 parents. So she's going to have more parents to care for than she had ever planned on having children. But here's the thing. If you can understand her, if you can understand her needs, her roles, and get, shall we say, into her head, truly get her, you get referrals, you get retention, you get prospects, because she's the conduit to the young, she is the consumer in the home, and she's the one advising mom, dad, mom-in-law, dad. So guys, this is where I said I was going to get sad for all of us. My wife likes to ask, am I reading my own research? Guess what? The highest divorce rate in the world is for those over age 50, so-called gray divorce. Why would you give up this big hunk of man after all? He's a dog lover. How can you beat that? So, let's ask now, why would you divorce this guy? Was it about money? That would have been great. It would have been appropriate for the group, right? Was it about sex? That would have been a lot more fun PowerPoint. So, does anybody want to shout out why? Or better yet, who initiates the divorce? 90% of the time. You notice the women shout first? And the answer is yes, it is the woman. Now, why, though, is instructive for all of us. It's not money, it's not relationship. The #1 answer is, he bores me, is the #1 answer. Now, with all respect to my good Canadian cousins and friends in the room, I think the Canadians have the reputation of being the nicer North Americans. Just between us, it's not that they're nice, they're passive aggressive. They did the same survey in Canada, And women came back with the following response: he simply ran out of gas. I don't know. This guy looks like he's got plenty of gas to me. Let's translate that humor into something I want you to use, though. If she's willing to drop kick his brand out the door after 25 years, 30 years of marriage, I have to suggest to you the following. Please do not talk about, well, I've been in this industry 10, 20, 30 years, whatever. And by the way, the company I work for, it's been around for 50, 100, 200. She's looking at her watch going, and you've got about 30 seconds to demonstrate your real value. It really is about, do you get her, if you will. And by the way, do you get her? There's something else going on with this longevity economy. I want to ask you, who is planning for her second retirement? Let's do some quick math. You know, an average woman marries a man who's 3 to 4 years older than she is. Average woman also outlives her husband by 7 to 8 years. Essentially, she has roughly 10 years in retirement that they plan for, they lived with briefly, but then she lives alone. Ladies and gentlemen, what are the discussions you're having around her longevity, around her second retirement, where she's going to live? And by the way, how many of you are familiar with the notion of the great wealth transfer? 80, 90 trillion, lots of numbers, trillions of dollars are allegedly going to go to my kids and your kids. Well, eventually that may be the case. But before I kick and write the check, it's going to go to women first. Her needs will change, her health needs will change, her priorities will change. And we know that behaviorally, women are more likely to reallocate dollars to more social causes and the like. This is a fundamentally different conversation that you have to have and be as dynamic as the life of the client that you're talking to. And then finally, the longevity economy, as I coined it in my book by the same title, is not just about the numbers of people that are aging. It's not about how long we're living and technology, our education, and about the future being female. Frankly, it's also about that's where the money is. The 60 plus in the world make up the third largest economy in the world. And by the way, the 50 plus in the United States control over 68% of the discretionary spending power in the United States. So that's where the money is. And if you've got all that, heck, you might as well enjoy 100 years of life. So let's get into what this means. How do we cash in that longevity dividend of a good 100 years? So far, over the last 2 years, I've spoken one-on-one with 247 financial professionals, and my team has surveyed and talked to thousands in between. And there's a trend line that's happening out there. The best and the brightest are finding that the conversation is no longer about portfolios. It's about me as a person. How am I doing mentally? How am I doing physically? How are my children doing? How do I plan and anticipate the world that I'm going to be navigating over the coming decades? I want you to think about this. The fastest growing part of the population is 85 plus. Think about that. And the reason why I want you to think about that is that if you have someone coming to you that has enough money to think about wanting to invest and do things with or plan or has those great ideas of what they want to do and has education, those are the two correlations to living a longer life. It is not necessarily choosing your parents well, genetics. It is not necessarily about how you eat and exercise. Yes, those are causality. But people with money and education, fair or not, tend to live longer. And so as a result, you've got to think longer. You've got to have conversations about things they haven't even thought about before. So let me ask you a question, and this is one that you can think about to yourself, but you should always be asking it. What is your value? What is your value when you approach a prospect, to a client, whatever it is? And many people in the financial professionals will say, well, I've got expertise. Well, these days, all of us, because we went to school too long, think we have expertise. You can trust me. Okay, that's a ground thing that we need to have. Finance is complex. You need my help on that. Absolutely. But you know, all of those reasons of perceived value is like going into a grocery store and going, oh my God, did you see they're selling watermelons? It's amazing. You have watermelons from the grocery store. You see, all those other values are base case. That's the price of essentially getting to talk to me as a potential colleague or a client. The number one value we have discovered of the research we've been doing at the MIT Age Lab is, do you get me? Do you get the things that matter to me? Do you understand my values? Do you understand what worries me? Do you understand what makes me tick? Money, again, is like electricity. You cannot do anything without it, but it's what you plug it into that makes a difference. So how do you get into that? How do you demonstrate that you get me? How do you provide what I call the new AI of advice? No, not the AI that everybody and their brother's talking about. What you can do, and I believe that what you are empowered to do, and the best and the brightest of you are already doing, is what I call anticipatory intelligence. How can you get me so that you can help me go to that next step? What are the tools you can use? Well, there's all kinds of software, there's all kinds of apps, there's all kinds of products. I'm going to suggest to you, it's actually the oldest technology in the world, the most powerful, the one that tells us why we do certain things, why we don't do others. And do you know what that technology is? The story. The stories you tell, the conversations that you have about what might be coming in the future, what they might want to think about in the future, why they need this insurance policy, why they need this kind of product overall. The story is what shows that you get them. The story is the best and the brightest and the most powerful form of education you can ever have. Because believe it or not, I've seen this after 27 years of teaching, nobody likes homework, but they all love stories. So let me show you the power of stories from way outside the area. How many of you play with Legos or give Legos to your kids? Come on, Legos are great toys, right? If you think about the building blocks of Legos, they're like dollars, they're like financial products. You can do almost anything with them. But do you know what happened a number of years ago? Someone had the bold audacity to start making more blocks, more plastic blocks, and selling them in big bags cheaper. They had turned this amazing toy into a commodity. How did Lego get their mojo back? Guess what? They connected it to the story. They started thinking about how we can give themes and stories of what you're going for. Remember my example about we hire products, services, and the like to get a job done? Part of your new education around longevity is to help me understand the jobs of longevity that I need to get done. All right, so we're going to do some simple math together. I want you to imagine this. By the way, don't you love this photo? This is the image of every retirement brochure on the freaking planet. Nobody knows who these people are, where they're going, and where the heck they came from. And yet, this apparently is what we think retirement's supposed to be. It's either you're in a wheelchair or you're walking down the beach. By the way, I find it particularly aggravating because if you notice he's retired, he's got a full head of hair, but we'll let that go. So let's go with some math. Remember I told you the fastest growing part of the population is 85 plus? Well, from 0 to 21 years old, if it makes it easier for the guy sitting right out back there to the right, 0 to 21 years old, drinking age, is about 8,000 days, believe it or not. And do you know that from 21 years old to 46, 47 years old, thereabouts, it's about 8,000 days. Midlife crisis, 8,000 days. And then from 46, 47 years old to the almost Newtonian law of physics of retirement, 65, guess what? It's 8,000 days. Now I bet the quant jocks in the room are getting the algorithm. And from 65 to 85 and change is how many days? 8,000 days. So ladies and gentlemen, if I take 0 to 21, we'll call that childhood or something young, and we'll push that off to the side gently. What you have to start thinking about is how can you use the story of 8,000 days to have people understand you are not planning for a brief walk down the beach. You are not planning for several rounds of pickleball or a trip to Disney. You are now planning, preparing even, for 1/3 of your adult life. What are the policies you need? What is the insurance you need? What are the opportunities that you're going to have? What are the challenges you need to prepare for? So let me give you some stories that you can tell that inspire, but also get them to initiate action. I would like you to think about retirement not as a single span of 8,000 days, but rather think of retirement as 4 different types of retirement. The first one, I call it managing ambiguity. You've retired, you've done all your cruises, you've painted the spare bedroom 6 different ways, the grandchildren are not nearly as cute as they used to be. Now what do? And guess what a lot of people do? They go back to work. In fact, anyone who visits me in Boston, I guarantee you, if you take Uber off from the airport, chances are you'll get into the car with a retired senior vice president from Fidelity, because they all seem to want to go back to work after about a year. The second one is managing big decisions. You know, there's this notion, if you will, that frankly, retirement's a time of ease and taking it easy. That's one of the big lies. Actually, there's lots of decisions. Financial decisions, where I'm going to live. Should I finally stop work? Is this the time to say I am, quote, in the traditional sense, retired? Or in the words of, I'm going to show my own age, of the rock group The Clash, should I stay or should I go? Do we move? Do we stay? Whatever it might be. And then there's the third one, managing complexity. Not just financial complexity, not just how many of us have had to explain to our parents when they get a bill from a health insurer, it says at the top, this is not a bill. Then on the bottom it says, you owe $806. Really? But think about the medications you're managing, providing care for a loved one. Is the home you're living in supporting what you need? And then eventually, no, not the, shall we say, existential eventually. I'm talking about at some point in a couple, someone's going to be living solo. How do I pay for that? Where is it going to be? What are the services and the like? So let me give you 5 questions that you're going to say you must be crazy, and probably are, certifiable, but things that will get your clients and your customers and whatnot to think not just about financial security, but realize why they need that financial security and how they can anticipate and navigate and prepare for a longer life. The first one is, what are you going to do on any given Tuesday at 10:30? Why is it that specific? Why is it that quirky? Because the industry overall goes, tell me your objectives in retirement. And by the way, you can write down the answers before the client does. You know what the answers are? You all know that. Well, I'm going to spend a lot of time with family, and we're going to travel, and there's so much to do around the house. I'm going to be so busy. By the way, COVID was a fire drill for retirement. We found a couple of things. One, you can only paint the spare bedroom so many times. All those hobbies you thought were great were not so great. And you also found your significant other found you significantly boring. So that's not going to work. So a lot of people, they end up in that first part of retirement, shall we say, doing work, retirement and the like. Others, you start thinking about, well, here are your options at older age. Some are going back to school. Entire universities, now that we have fewer children, are looking at older adults, shall we say, as a new market for education. Not just for education's sake, but starting entirely new businesses. Volunteering, having a sense of purpose, mattering to your fellow people. But my favorite example was when I was picked up by an Uber driver in Florida, and he picked me up, and I used the cheaper Uber, but this guy picked me up in a Mercedes. I thought, hey, this is a great gig. He picks me up, and on his lap was this crazy dog. And so the dog's staring at me, and we're talking, and I asked the guy, he has a Red Sox hat on, Boston Red Sox. I say, hey, are you from Boston? And he says, oh yeah, in thick Boston accent. I say, yeah, we're the wife and I and Sam, apparently Sam was the name of the dog, moved down here from Boston. I sold a real estate company, and we now live over there. And he's pointing to the high-rise luxury hotels, pick a brand, and then add 3 times the price. So, by the way, the dog's looking at me because he can tell I'm getting nosy. And so I'm looking at him in the mirror thinking, okay, I'm on my way to a focus group to ask people about how they're planning retirement, but this guy seems to be a real case. So I kind of look at him in the mirror, he's looking back at me, and I say, so you sold a real estate company, you live in a luxury high-rise connected to a luxury hotel, why are you driving for Uber? And he looks at me and his eyes kind of go wide, and the dog's starting to growl because now I'm getting personal. And he says, you know what the wife and I and Sam and I do every morning? Sam the dog. And I said, no sir. He says, the wife and I, we walked down the beach and we waved to all the nice people. Do you want me to do after that? And I'm still have this vision of this little short dachshund with short legs going over the sand dunes like this. And I said, no sir, what do you do after that? He says, we turn around, we wave, and we say hi to the same damn people all over again. You see, retirement is a work in progress. And now that we're getting more time, we need someone to give us advice and ideas of what that might be. Second question for you, who are you going to have lunch with? Sounds silly, doesn't it? You think about it, you spend more time with your work colleagues, waking work time, than your own family. I want you to not just think about your wealth portfolio, I want you to start helping your clients think about their social portfolio, their friends, their colleagues. How many people have they met that are new and made new friends? I hate to be, shall we say, depressing, but as we age, there's a certain attrition to friendship, and that's a true longevity risk. And in fact, studies have shown that, in fact, Americans in particular like doing things like bowling. We like doing things that are hobby related. But guess what? We no longer join groups. So this great book called Bowling Alone, Bob Putnam at Harvard recognized that we all still apparently like bowling, but we don't join bowling leagues. And by the way, we not only don't do things together, guess what? We live alone. Look at it, by the way, it's an election year, so we have to have a little bit of fun. Look at this. Nearly half the people in Washington, D.C. don't want to live with anyone, and we can't blame them. 48% of households there are households of one. That's a very different way of preparing for a longer life and what the expectations are. It's actually more expensive to live alone than it is to live as a couple. I don't want to forget my friends in Canada. When I look at Canadian data, we also see a real concentration of more and more people living alone. In fact, it's not just a North American phenomenon, it is the fastest growing phenomenon worldwide from Asia to Europe, South America, and Australia. And by the way, once again, it is primarily a female issue. Over time, she is more likely to live alone. And by the way, this is not just about whether it's nice or sad or lonely, but loneliness has the physical health impacts of smoking 11 to 15 cigarettes per day. Longevity literacy is about finance. It's about what you're going to be doing, but it's also about remember what Sarah Noss, our 119-year-old, said, I have my health and I can do things. It's about helping people have quality years, not just financially secure years. How about this one? Who's going to change your light bulbs? Sounds really silly, doesn't it? Changing your light bulbs. But imagine this. As you get older, what's the capacity, if you will, to be able to stay in the home you love, to be able to do all those big and little things that many of us take for granted? In fact, in the United States and parts of Europe as well, the vast majority of us want to age in place. That's fancy talk for by the time you're in your 50s, your marriage, your mortgage, and your memories are in that house. That's where you want to stay. The vast majority want to do that, but only half believe they will be able to, either due to financial issues or frankly, because they don't have the wherewithal to be able to maintain the home. And by the way, this is a financial issue. Maintaining a home, the classic home owned by a baby boomer in the United States is a 1974 home, and maintaining that home even at a base level is typically 1 to 2% of value. And all the other services to change those light bulbs and the like, whether it's bringing people in, trusted folks to bring in, or even using the service economy to come in and do lots of things, that requires financing. It all goes back to your financial literacy, but we want to overlay that with longevity literacy. My favorite question is this one. Because to me, ice cream is a food group. Well, so is coffee, but ice cream is a food group. I want you to ask yourself and ask your clients, how are you going to get an ice cream cone? I know, you're saying, okay, he's really certifiable. No, I want you to think about the following. When we ask about retirement planning, we typically go for these big, haughty goals, your objectives in the future and whatnot. But you know something? People will be motivated to take action, to invest, to plan, to do what they need to do on the little things. What are the little things that bring you joy? The things that make you smile? Remember that question about what you're going to do on Tuesday at 10:30? Do you have access? Do you know the things that make you have a quality of life in older age? And do you have access to it? And again, this has a financial issue. Does anyone want to shout out for me the top 3 costs in retirement for a couple over 65? Healthcare, yeah, that's number 3. What's number 1? Home is number 1. But number 2, almost no one gets this. Bureau of Labor Statistics, couple over 65. Number 2 is transportation. And I want you to imagine this, 70% of Americans and Canadians live in suburban and rural areas where if you don't drive, no ice cream for you. You don't get out. Remember, it's not about going to the doctor or the grocery store. That will happen. But having the finances, the wherewithal, and the preparedness to say, I'm going to live here because I have access to what I want, or I'm going to live here because I have the transportation resources that I need. And even if you don't get out, maybe you don't have the mobility, remember, telemedicine, home delivery, all the things we got used to, those are real costs. And they must be thought about in terms of how we're going to live longer and well. And then the final question I want you to think about, how much does an adult daughter cost? I can tell you how much my 21-year-old and 31 cost, and it's a lot. But I tell you one thing, the adult daughter is the most expensive and most important issue for living longer. But here's the problem. Remember what I started about where we're living longer and we're having fewer children? Now it comes full circle. Because you see, the adult daughter does so much, but if you had no children, you're going to have to outsource that. You don't want to be a burden. And by the way, she's more likely than not is working. Maybe she's got children, or she lives at a distance. Or remember that guy that was divorced that I showed you? She's now ticked at him and she's not talking to him. So as a result, what we have to start thinking about is the things that we always thought were kind of a trend line, that, well, the kids will take care of me, even in cultures and countries where that is the tradition. We did a big study in India where my generation said, yeah, I'm taking care of my parents, but my kids, they're going to be doing something else. That's a new cost in retirement that few people are thinking about. And when you think about caregiving, it's not simply about picking up the phone and going, hey, Dad, how you doing? It begins with that, and it starts talking about, hey, something's broken. How do I get it fixed? And it's about, hey, Mom, did you take your medications today? And then, by the way, we all know, we don't like to admit it, so don't tell your parents I said this, mothers lie. Do you notice when they call you on a weekend and they say they feel a little dizzy, they don't feel very well? You rush them to the doctor on Monday morning, you go to the doctor says, so, what's up? And then they go, oh, I'm fine, I'm great. So it's that healthcare intermediary, managing finances, and if you notice, it only stacks up. So let me end on the following. I want to thank all of you for inviting me here. I want to thank Bill on amazing work that Swan, Alicia, and all of you at WSB have done. But the role I see all of you playing in this new frontier of longevity preparedness, longevity literacy, is one, you could become curators. Remember, the idea of curating stories about what are the possibilities that you will have in older age. I'm not telling you to tell people what to do. I want you to broaden my horizon of what there is to do, how I'm going to pay for it, to think of things I've never thought about before. Remember, the real AI, anticipatory intelligence. I want you to be a co-creator. I want you to take those stories and start thinking about how you can engage the family, not just the client, not just the couple, but maybe the adult children as well. We age, we live, and we live well as a group, as a social network. How do you bring that together? And then ultimately, it's not just about the product, it's not just about the revenue stream or even the health of the portfolio. Can you be a connector? Can you connect me to the solutions as someone I can trust to come in the home to change my mother's light bulbs? She lives by herself. She's cognitively not nearly as well. Are you a solution provider as much as a provider of financial education and products? Let me leave you with a story that I always find inspiring. But I have to tell you, when Swan asked me to come and speak here, I was honored because, as some of you know, I've spoken before. All of you give me incredible energy for what you're doing, not just for yourselves to live the dream, but to make other people's dreams happen. And this story made me think of all of you. And some of you may have heard of it. There was a man walking down a beach one day. It's called the starfish story. Walking down the beach one day, and he saw a young boy picking up starfish that had been on the beach and left behind by the tide. And the boy was picking up starfish, and he was swinging them out in the ocean. And the man was kind of watching this curiosity, and the boy picked up another starfish, and he throws it out into the ocean. The man comes up to the boy and goes, "What are you doing?" And the boy says, "Well, all these starfish are going to die if I don't save them, so I'm throwing them out there so they don't die." And of course, the man, being wise and older, starts laughing at the kid. He goes, "All these starfish? We can't save these starfish." The boy just looks at him, picks up one, throws it out there, and says, "Save that one." Ladies and gentlemen, all of you are saving us one at a time. Thank you very much.